Hello, Rambling Rector here again. Continuing my series of St. Paul, this is the third video in the series about 1 Corinthians, and today I thought I'd focus principally on the 13th chapter of Paul's letter to the Corinthians. And this is a passage from Scripture that you will have heard immeasurably, or a very large number of times, and certainly at pretty much every wedding you've ever been to. This is the one that is trotted out. And it's a beautiful thing, and very widely misunderstood. So I'll quickly read it for you. It begins thus: If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have all faith, and if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way, it is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends, but as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even I, as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. And of course, there is cooing and sighing all around the church as people go, oh, they obviously love each other. They've got that reading. The tragedy of it is this. Paul wrote that in a spirit of high dudgeon. He was absolutely furious with the Corinthians because they had rather misused the word of God. A lot of the meaning is lost to us because it was originally written in Greek. And as you may or may not know, the Greeks have got lots and lots of words for love in a way that speakers of English do not. And I think that tells you all you need to know about the difference between the Greeks and the English. Please don't get involved in a flame war over that. But you can see what I mean. Paul is very clearly using that word love in the sense of agape in the community, the sense of love between Christians and people who are in a community. And we at a wedding are thinking of love as in eros, as in sexual love, or that powerful sort of love that drives relationships, certainly in the early stages. And so we are fundamentally misunderstanding what Paul is doing, and he's also putting this in to his letter after he'd been rather dismissive of people who speak in tongues and do other things like that, who are rather critical of other members in their Christian communities and say, well, look, this would be so much better if you weren't here, and, you know, I know God's given you a gift of whatever, healing or prophecy or whatever, but actually we've got plenty of those. We don't need any of those. So Paul is very much having a go at his readers. Now, it's interesting because the historical record reflects, and 2 Corinthians suggests, that actually he got a lot of people offside when he wrote the first letter to the Corinthians. I think they probably got a little bit terse with him in their reply, and certainly 2 Corinthians, which is probably a combination of 2 letters, reflects that, and he's a little bit more amenable, shall we say, and a little bit less prescriptive. But let's return to chapter 13. So let's read that in a slightly different way. And the best way to do it is to try and sort of channel Paul and say, here it is. He's very, very angry. So, if I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love between us, Christian people, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. All I'm doing is just making a lot of noise, okay? And if I have prophetic powers, so-called, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, sure, and if I have all faith, because I'm a wonderful person, and so as to remove mountains, but do not have love between us all, I am nothing. You can be the most faithful person, sure in your heart of the love you have for God and of God's love for you. But if you don't love other people, and if you don't show them that you love them, then that's not really very, very Christian, says Paul. If I give away all my possessions, if I'm hugely charitable, if I just give it all away, so I don't want any of that stuff. And if I hand over my body, this is unimportant to me. I don't need this shell that I walk around in. I don't need all these frivolous things that I have. I don't need all those because I'm an uber Christian. And actually, I don't like any of you because I'm better than you. Then actually, you're not probably going to find your way into the kingdom of heaven, says Paul. Love is patient, not like you. Love is kind, not like you. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude, like you are. It does not insist on its own way, as you have typically done. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. So it's the exact opposite of what you are. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That's what love is, but it's not what you are. So that's interesting. So, of course, and in the full throes of a wedding ceremony, we're sitting here and cooing and ahhing and saying, isn't this lovely? When actually what we're really saying is exactly the opposite, but I digress. Love never ends, unlike whatever this is. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. Okay, so all this stuff that you're putting all this store by, all this speaking in tongues, all this worldly knowledge, like I'm espousing to you now, there's an end to that. But actually, if you don't learn anything from that knowledge, if you don't get wisdom from that knowledge, then actually you've got nothing at all. We know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. I mean, I sit here and tell you all about what St. Paul meant by his first letter to the Corinthians, but I can only really look into his mind from what he wrote and from context and from these other things. Did I know Paul? No. I to coin a phrase, I can get his fax number, but no, I've never met Paul. He died sometime before I was born. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. Like you are. I thought like a child, like you are. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. When I grew up in the faith, when I became born again, you see, I put aside to these childish ways. Do you know how children negotiate? They just scream and shout till they get what they want, and that's what you're doing. Okay, you Christians in Corinth, that's what you're doing. You're just screaming and shouting till you get your own way. Now we see in a mirror dimly, for then we will see face to face. So we are looking through a mirror. Now, of course, he's not talking about these wonderful sort of, silver-lined glass mirrors we have these days. It's a highly polished piece of steel, or perhaps bronze, or perhaps iron. Probably not iron, but so, and that can take a sheen, can take a polish, but we're only seeing something very dimly. We're only getting an impression of what something is truly like. But at some point, fairly soon, we're going to see face to face. We are going to be in the room with God. Now, I only know at the moment in part. Then I will know fully at this point, which is not very far away. And now faith and hope and love abide. Charity, okay, faith and love. These three, and the greatest of these is love, agape, not eros, agape. The love we show to each other. And that's the message of the 13th chapter of Paul's letter to Corinthians. And it's typical of all the other things that he wrote in that letter. He was furious with them. He wanted to wag his hand. He wanted to point at them. He wanted to be absolutely cross with them because they were not on message. They had completely missed the point. They were being self-indulgent. They were getting drunk before the Eucharist. They weren't letting the slaves in. They weren't doing all sorts of terrible things. They were having sex with each other. I mean, it's outrageous because they thought that they were a people forgiven and they could get away with anything. And Paul knew that all of that counted as nothing if they didn't love one another, if they were not, as Christians ought to be, loving, kind to each other, listening, and not shouting. So that's the message of Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. I hope you got something from that. I'm going to do a couple of other videos on other writings of Paul, because I find what he wrote to be absolutely fascinating. And again, if you can understand the context that he's writing in, he's an amazing man, and to whom we owe a great debt of gratitude for being able to put into words that which we believe, and that he was also able to, through a fair degree of sensitivity, to actually call people to account. And his message lives on and is as relevant to us these days as it was to Chloe and her people in Corinth in the first century. So please like and subscribe, and any comments as usual down below, and I will seek to do more videos and help you along your Christian path as well. Thank you.